Welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm Brian Lovett, aka B-Love. Today we're taking a look at this filament dryer called the Cyclopes from a company called EIBOS. Let's get into it. Now, EIBOS is a new company in the 3D printing space. In fact, this is their first product that's set to launch via Kickstarter. So if you get in early enough, you might be able to get a really good deal on one of these as one of the early bird supporters. Now, this one's called the Cyclopes, and what this is it's a 3D printer filament spool dryer. And now the reason that's important in the first place is because, as you're probably aware, 3D printer filament is actually hygroscopic, and what that means is that it absorbs water from the atmosphere around it. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, let's say you've got something like 3D printer filament and you're running it through say a print head nozzle at 230 degrees Celsius. What do you think is going to happen when that water touches that hot nozzle? It instantly becomes steam. That becomes problematic because steam creates pressure and it tries to escape. And while you're trying to escape from molten plastics, what ends up happening is it bubbles and globs and leaves all kinds of surface defects on your prints, and it's just a mess. That's why we dry our filament spools. Now, of course, there are a number of ways you can dry your 3D printer filament spools, right? Everybody's probably used an oven at some point, although that's probably the sketchiest way for you to possibly do this because ovens are notoriously bad at holding a steady temperature and keeping an accurate temperature. You can be off by 20, 30 degrees, and that can be beyond the glass point. It's when the filament starts to melt. It's when it becomes soft and pliable. That's where products like this come in. Now, there are some other people that have done DIY projects with things like food dehydrators. You can modify and rig one up to allow you to dry multiple spools. In fact, I just watched a video recently with Joel Telling where he went through and he has a very large food dehydrator that can fit many rolls into. That's fine for a lot of people. In my case, I think this is interesting because you can dry the filament out and you can actually print with it while it's drying or after it's been dried. The first thing we'll do is just take a look at the box. So this has the ability to dry 2 spools at the same time, and you can do double reels of 217 by 80 millimeters. So that's kind of your standard spools that you have, or you can do an extra wide spool, those really wide spools that are 174 millimeter. And in that case, you can only dry out one of those at a time. This allows you to set the time that you want to dry this for, anywhere from 1 minute up to 24 hours or unlimited and anything in between. It also allows you to in real time see the temperature and the humidity inside of the box. So with that said, let's bust this thing open. Pull this tab open and see what's in here. Thank you for choosing EIBOS. Get ready for your best printing experience. Oh, look at this. They've actually got a personalized card in here. It says, "Hi, Brian. Thank you for being our first batch of users. We appreciate about your trust. Cyclops and Eurus are in the box. Hope you like them. Enjoy." That's amazing. I'm really excited about this. Let's get into this. So we've got a user manual. We've got a little bit of plastic tubing. This, I assume, is what the filament runs through when you have it exit out of the device. We've got some rollers and roller bearings. We've got a number of different plug types, just in case you live abroad. This is a plexiglass cover. I think the design aesthetic of this thing is really top notch. I'm actually really excited about that because I think oftentimes with 3D printing, form is not so much of a consideration. A lot of this stuff is still very industrial looking, but I think EIBOS, they spend a lot of time looking at the actual, not only the function of the product, but the actual aesthetic as well, which I appreciate. Aesthetics do matter. This is the filament vacuum pump. This is the Eurus. We will talk about this too. I didn't know they were sending over the Eurus. This is their other product that they're launching, so that's really exciting as well. Got a little bit of bubble wrap for protection. And then the actual base of the unit. And I believe that's it that's in the box. So we're done with that now. Now this looks pretty simple to set up. So what I'm gonna do, look at that. I don't know, that's pretty elegant looking, just looking at that. Now, the first thing we're gonna need to do, obviously, is put the roller wheels on. Nice and smooth. Let's see what we can do about getting a couple filament rolls in here. Just so happen to have two. Just move nice and easily, and we have it. That is beautiful. All right, so I did actually break open the instructions because, well, I've never used a filament dryer and I think that it's worth checking out. So they do actually give these recommended settings based on the filament type. It gives you a temperature and a duration that it suggests to dry these at. And it's all based on their own laboratory testing that they did, where they can show the actual decrease in the moisture content of the printer spools. So these are both rolls of PETG. We're doing 65 degrees Celsius for 2 or so hours. So let's try and get this thing going. All right, so now that we've got this guy plugged in, let's go ahead and power it on using the power button. And we've got a nice display. What we'll do is we'll set the temperature for PETG. You can hear there's a fan going right now. It's not very loud. You might be able to hear it a little bit on the background, but it's not very loud. And we'll go ahead and set the temperature to the PETG temperature they recommend in the book, which is 65 degrees Celsius. And we'll go ahead and set a time of 2 hours for it to run. Now, our starting humidity, according to the dial up here, is 47%. So what we'll do is we'll let this run for the 2 hours, and then we'll come back and see what percentage we're at. We'll see how we're doing. All right, we let this sit here for a good 2 hours yesterday, and then I came back and I fired it up again. I had to do some things yesterday, so I didn't get to finish the video before today. Now, if you'll recall, we started out at 47% humidity. Now it's down to 17% in here. So this does effectively dry or reduce the moisture inside of the air inside of here. You can also feel hot air coming off of the top here. There's some holes at the top, as you can see. And that's sort of where air is sucked from underneath. It's heated and it's pushed up through the center and then exits out of the top here. So that seems to be working effectively as you would expect. Now, if we take this off, you can smell that there's heated filament in the air. So there is that, and the filament rolls are quite warm. So they are being heated as well. You can feel the hot air coming up all around the filament. So it's pretty surrounded by a warm kind of cushion of air. Now, obviously, I don't have the scientific equipment to go in and actually test the water molecule level or the saturation level of the filament. But what this does tell us is this does effectively push out moisture within the air that's inside of the container, and that's exactly what we want this to do. How can you prove the effectiveness of this? Well, really the way you need to look at any sort of filament drying mechanism, whether it's an oven, a dehydrator, something like the Cyclopes, is the fact that it's one less variable you need to think about. And there are dozens of things that can go wrong. You can have filament that you're printing at the wrong temperature. Perhaps your bed isn't warm enough, the bed isn't prepped properly, your first layer calibration isn't right. But one thing you can rest assured is that you don't have to worry about there being excess moisture inside of your filament. So it's one less thing you have to worry about. And with something as crazy and complex as 3D printing, one less thing actually adds up. Here's the part I'm probably most excited about. This comes with Teflon tubing that you can push through these rubber grommets on the back side of the spool holder, and you can put one through each side. So there's plenty of length here. As you can see, you can cut this in multiple pieces. But once you've run the filament through there, you now have a nice, easy way to run this up to your 3D printer. And a lot of times 3D prints, like for example the rockets that I'm 3D printing now, take 6 or 8 hours to print. Now, you can set the timer on this for maybe 6 hours, and you can have your 3D printer filament actually drying while it's printing. The other reason I like this one over some of the other models I've seen is the fact that it allows for 2 spools. For example, you happen to have a dual extruder on your 3D printer, meaning you can print 2 materials at the same time. You can actually set this up to where both filament types are being dried simultaneously while you're still printing. Now, what about downsides of this? Well, I mean, there's a little bit of noise, there's a fan running, but it's quieter than a 3D printer, and there is some air coming out, and there is a little bit of odor in the air just from heating filament, but it's not anything that's causing discomfort or that's going to be really any different than 3D printing. Probably the only thing I can say is kind of a downside to this is the length of the cable. You can see it's quite short, the power cable, so you may need to have an extension cord or something if this isn't able to be plugged in right next to your 3D printer. But I mean, as far as negatives go for a product, that's pretty nitpicky and minor, I think. This is a solution that I wouldn't mind having sit on my desk. It's aesthetically pleasing. I think it's actually pretty beautiful the way they've designed this, and so this isn't something I would mind having sit out in the middle of my room. So what happens if you want to dry filament and you don't want to print with it right away, or you've got a whole bunch of spools that you want to dry? Well, you can dry them in here, and then this has the Eurus in it. And the Eurus is actually pretty clever. So we'll go ahead and open this up. And what you'll find inside are these bags, a resealable filament holder, filament spool holder, and you can see it's quite large, plenty of room. And it has this cap on it. Now what this cap is for is the other item inside of the bag. And if we pull this out, you can see it is a USB powered vacuum pump. This is pretty cool. So what you can do is you obviously dry your filament, place it in the bag, and this is I don't know if you can tell this on the camera, but this is a nice thick Ziploc at the top of this bag. And then this just unscrews. See that there? And let's go ahead and get our USB plugged in here. So there's a power button over here. And you can hear, oh wow, that has a really good vacuum. So what we do is we just thread this guy on here. And then let's see what happens. I mean, that's impressive. You can see, how tightly that was pulled in there. I mean, this is very vacuumed. This is probably maybe even more vacuum sealed than a lot of filament spools come from the factory. And this cool thing about this is it's reusable. And the other thing you could do is you can drop one of those desiccant packets, those little packets that come with most of our filament spools. You could just drop a desiccant packet right in the middle. And then when you vacuum seal this, that's going to just make sure that there's no additional moisture in the air. Now, a desiccant packet doesn't dehydrate or remove water from your filament, but what it does is it removes it from the air so that it can't be easily transferred into the filaments. So really, this comes with 3 of these reusable bags, and then you have the 2 here, so you can have 5 rolls of filament dried out and ready to go. Overall, I'm really impressed with what EIBOS has come out of the gate with. Between the Cyclopes and the Eurus, you've got everything you need to ensure that your 3D printer filament spools are taken care of. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about this. I'll do another video if there are enough questions and people would like me to follow up with anything on this. Otherwise, go 3D print something awesome, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks as always.